Please join me in welcoming Stanford Professor and Associate Director of Stanford High, as well as a newly appointed member of the National Artificial Intelligence Advisory Committee, Dr. Daniel Ho. Dr. Ho will make remarks on public sector artificial intelligence.
Well, thanks so much to Deputy Secretary Graves and the Commerce Department for hosting this event. It's been a great discussion so far. Some things are obvious. AI poses fundamental questions for individuals, organizations, and society. But what is not obvious is what to do about those questions. How should we govern or regulate AI? How should we harness its benefits while minimizing its harms? What are the policy shifts required to meet the call of this conference to chart a path forward for responsible and inclusive AI? Any conversation about managing AI innovation, I think, has to grapple with the public sector for three reasons. One, how the federal government responds to AI will tell us a lot about the challenges of managing AI in any kind of complex organization, public or private. Two, government will be essential to any efforts to regulate AI. And three, the public has a lot at stake when technologies could benefit, for instance, veterans who currently wait years to hear about their disability appeals. Too often, government fails to serve, eroding public trust. This is all to say that when it comes to cultivating responsible and inclusive AI, government matters. But here's the catch. The public sector, like other incumbent organizations, is plagued by some big problems when it comes to technology. First, our systems and data infrastructure are significantly outdated. When the pandemic first hit New Jersey, the governor went on TV and announced that the state needed two things: healthcare workers and COBOL programmers. If you haven't heard of COBOL, it's probably because the programming language is 60 years old. And if you have, I know you've been around for a while. Second, we have a human capital crisis. Put bluntly, government is not recruiting nor retaining the best and brightest AI minds. According to the most recent AI index, 60% of AI PhDs went into industry in 2020, and less than 2% went into government. The reasons are varied, and it's not just the difficulty of navigating the USA Jobs site. One Stanford PhD deeply wanted to do public sector AI, but left the field after having to wait for over a year for a major agency to procure a single computing GPU node. Third is the issue of scale. It's one thing to move fast and break things for a startup. It's a whole other thing for government. As former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair once said, quote, "Most of the problems of government come from people being overwhelmed by the size and scale of what they have to do." Revamping public sector resources to effectively manage AI will be a monumental effort, but not an insurmountable one. And if we want the public sector to pave the way for responsible and inclusive AI, solving these problems will be essential. So let me make 4 suggestions on that front. 1, we need to invest in human capital. This means training and hiring a federal workforce that has the expertise to both develop and interrogate AI applications. I'll give you one example. A few years ago, the SEC piloted a way to scan filings for signs of insider trading. From a technical standpoint, this was a hugely innovative feature. But the hard and important questions came through the interactions between non-technical prosecutors and engineers. Essentially, the prosecutor said, I got to litigate this in front of a judge. I can't just have a risk score. I need to be able to explain and investigate what parts of a filing triggered this risk. The SEC example shows the importance of hiring individuals who can design algorithms responsibly, who can ask the right questions about how they work, and who can see beyond disciplinary fields and professional lanes. Recent initiatives like the hiring line for data scientists and the US Digital Service Corps are positive steps, but we need to dramatically expand the digital talent pipeline and provide a vision for meaningful AI work. We cannot govern AI if government doesn't understand AI. 2, we have to invest in data infrastructure. A major impediment of pandemic response in cities like Houston and San Jose wasn't the lack of AI solutions, it was a fax machine. One Houston employee described what happened when their health department was flooded with COVID test results. Quote, "Picture the image of hundreds of faxes coming through and the machine just shooting out paper." Weak data infrastructure can obscure serious health disparities too. One study found that because of incomplete demographic data, COVID case disparities between Latinx and white individuals were 1.6 times higher than what's reported. The proposal for a national AI research resource, championed by Stanford High and mentioned in the morning conversation between Deputy Secretary Graves and Susan Athey, is one way of tackling this problem. It would give AI researchers and students secure access to high-quality administrative data to tackle these sorts of questions. When the US Geological Service did something similar, by making Landsat satellite imagery free to researchers, it generated $3 to $4 billion in benefits annually, catalyzing discoveries in habitat modification, climate change, and poverty. The National AI Research Resource and efforts like it can help to ensure that the best minds of our generation devote themselves to more than just getting people to click on ads. 3, we need to evaluate AI systems much more expansively. The call for algorithmic impact assessments is a good first step, but evaluations need to be ongoing, not episodic. We also need to go beyond conventional lab metrics of evaluating algorithmic performance and to understand performance in the real-world context. Take the controversial example of predictive policing. While predictive policing tools were touted for great performance on lab metrics, leading field experiments showed that they utterly failed at their stated purpose, reducing crime. Evaluation means ethical assessments too. There are deep concerns with the idea of deploying AI in high-risk settings like policing, and it's crucial that we have serious conversations about the ethics of such deployments. Without the kinds of frameworks that NIST is developing, effective ways of evaluating, assessing, and auditing AI as deployed, we have no way of knowing whether these tools even work or if they're simply inflicting more harm. 4, and last, we have to build new kinds of partnerships. The uptake of new AI tools is happening fast and at an unprecedented scale, requiring new agile forms of governance and research. And let me point you to another historical juncture when government was faced with a problem of scale and had to move quickly. After World War II, about 10 million veterans, it's about the size of the whole population of Portugal, was poised to come home after fighting overseas. There were serious questions about how the VA system could handle this, and in a monumental but underappreciated decision, the VA issued a brief policy memo in 1946 that outlined a new legal framework for academic collaborations with the VA hospital systems. As a result, 84% of medical schools have partnered with VA hospitals, 70% of VA physicians hold academic appointments, and these partnerships opened a pipeline for future doctors into the VA, broke ground with innovations like pacemakers and CAT scans, and improved veterans' care. So my question for you is this: why not do the same for public sector AI and governance? In a field where research from 2019 can be considered old, can academic agency partnerships help revitalize the public sector? At Stanford High, we're working to shape that kind of collaborative future. We've built teams of interdisciplinary researchers to solve real-world problems, moving outside of the lab. One team at Stanford's Regulation, Evaluation, and Governance Lab, for instance, is tackling the annual tax gap, the $500 billion difference between taxes owed and taxes paid, from an efficiency and equity perspective in collaboration with IRS and Treasury. We've convened teams of engineers, philosophers, social scientists, physicians, and lawyers to interrogate foundation models. We've prototyped an ethics review board so researchers can contemplate the societal and ethical implications of their research before being awarded a grant. And I myself am looking forward to continuing this kind of work as a member of the National AI Advisory Committee. We all have a role to play in cultivating this kind of collaborative future. The challenges of the next generation of work are too complex and too cross-cutting for us to stay put in our professional or disciplinary lanes. Industry will get this wrong if government cannot get this right. Now, in 2022, we have the chance to do what the VA did almost 80 years ago, to craft an environment for agile, responsible, and inclusive innovation and governance, and to harness that innovation for the benefits of all. Thank you.